Well, thank you all for coming along and joining this workshop. I mean, you all know, I think a lot of you have been to Olga's events in the past, so we're going to have lots of information. And the good thing is you don't have to make all the notes because you can keep it, you'll get it, we'll upload it, and then you can refer back to it. I always know with Olga's ones, I forget half of it at the end, and then I think, oh gosh, I have to go back and get all that information. So that's great. A couple of things from me before we start. So we've had this forum on the website for a while, and I finally come to terms with the fact that it's actually quite difficult to use because you have to flip around from whatever it is you're doing. So what we've done is we've created a closed Facebook group for those of you who are on Facebook and use Facebook, just for the members of the community, and I will be posting things in there, and someone else in our team will be posting things in there that we'll probably put on the forum too, but it'll just be easier for you to access if you use social media. So please join that if you want to. Anyway, there's a link in the newsletter that I sent out. Okay, let me just have a look and see if I've received this, and then we can get going.
It's still sending, so it's about 40% sent now. Because
oh, it's a big one.
It's heavy, yeah.
Oh, it's a big one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you want to just start off and with well, just before you do, if you have questions, put them in chat as always, and Olga will address them as we go along. Anything specific. And Olga, if you want to just start with an intro, and then as soon as I get it, I'll share it.
You'll put it up, right?
Yeah,
of course. And thank you, Stella. Well, hello everyone. I'm so happy to see all your faces. And so today's talk is about mental health, about mood, and about anxiety, depression. So this has become a very, important subjects, especially after the lockdown, because a lot of people have suffered depression during the lockdown, and it's, the research is going on about why we're getting depressed when we're in the lockdown, what's happening to us. We're trying to understand why we have epidemic now of depression and anxiety, because almost every second client who comes to the clinic, almost, probably if not 60–70% of people do have at least anxiety or at least low mood or problems with mood, and they don't understand why. And of course, the first thing you do is you go to a doctor, and then they put you on antidepressants. So I'm not saying the antidepressants are not good or don't help, but they do have side effects, and I would probably try some natural therapies, of course, before resorting to medication. So today I wanted to tell you some recent research updates on causes of low mood, anxiety, and depression, of course, about the role of nutrition and nutrients especially. We'll have a look at lots of dietary intervention trials, so what's been done in the last 3–4 years, just to see, what you can achieve with change in diet and what dietary compounds actually do help us with managing depression. We're going to look at some of the biological pathways, because I think it's quite important for us to understand how it works as well. And of course, then we'll look into some practical solutions, things that you can add to your diet, tests that you can do, because again, everyone's biologically different and everyone's individual, and causes could be different in each person. And then we'll hopefully have some time for questions. So there are so many different theories about why we have psychological or physiological imbalances associated with mood disorders. So they could be anything from nutrient deficiencies. You probably heard about vitamin D, how it affects our mood, or omega-3 fatty acids. And these have been investigated quite a lot. And I'll show you some trials that show some results. Some research shows that it could be because of the toxicity, for example, heavy metal toxicity. Mercury, lead, aluminium have been shown to make our moods worse, or even increase the risk of Alzheimer's or dementia, or depression. Certain neurotransmitter imbalance. So we know that serotonin is a happy hormone, and if we don't have enough serotonin, that can make our mood worse. And this is how antidepressants work, because they block serotonin. So they called selective serotonin receptor inhibitors. Basically, they inhibit the receptors, and then you get more serotonin in your system, basically. So you don't get rid of serotonin easily. It could also be due to digestive issues, because we know there is a gut-brain axis, and our gut communicates to our brain a lot, and we're trying to kind of understand that dual pathway. How do they talk to each other? With what? How do they understand each other? How? Because very often what I see in clinic, again, if a client presents with depression, there's something going on with their digestion as well. It could be that we have low thyroid function or low adrenal function. So these are as well could affect our mood and depression risk. So let's have a look at some nutrients first. I believe Stella has just downloaded the presentation. Stella, do you see it now?
Yes, I have. I'm going to, yeah, I'm just going to share it.
Great. On slide 4, so this is kind of a good explanation of the point that when we talk about a single nutrient, for example, omega-3 or vitamin D, and then we know that yes, they are important for mood regulation, for neurotransmitter production, for brain function, for all of these things. But if we do a scientific trial, which is a gold standard, slide 4, please. Yeah, which is the gold standard.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. Yes. Mm-hmm. So if you could just open, slide 4, please. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and make.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Does anyone know how I get this on? Sorry.
Yeah. No, there on the right bottom. There is a little button where it says notes, and then go to the right. No, left now. Left. Lower, right, and then a little bit left, just stop.
Yes.
Not the notes, no, not the notes, next one. So the last button, next, this one, yeah.
Apologies.
It will open the screen, yes. Great. So is there a magic nutrient? And that's the question that research is trying to ask us. So we do know that, of course, omega-3 and vitamin D and B vitamins, they all are super important for, for our moods or for risk of depression or reducing anxiety. But what the research is trying to do, they take all people with depression and they put them on omega-3 fatty acids, and they measure depression scores before and measure depression scores after. And most of the time, it doesn't show much benefit. And we're wondering why. So Stella, if you could go back to the slide, it shows you why it's really not.
Sorry, guys, I'm not very good at this.
So it shows you why this kind of approach doesn't work. Is because, slide 4, please. Is because so this is the diagram of how we make serotonin, for example. So can you see how many things you need to have in order to make serotonin from the protein? You need zinc, vitamin B1, vitamin B6. You need sufficient level of stomach acid. That's only step 1. Step 2, then you need folate, iron, B3, calcium. And then last step, you need, again, zinc, B6, magnesium, vitamin C, in order for the whole thing to happen, in order for you to produce serotonin. So one nutrient approach just does not make any biological sense at all. It doesn't work like that. Plus, you have to take into account, if people are not deficient in omega-3, giving them more omega-3 is not going to make any difference at all. But people who are deficient potentially will get improved moods and reduced anxiety. So, and vitamin D, I've seen exactly the same. If you look at the review of interventional trials, for example, usually some big medical journal like Lancet does it maybe every 2 to 3 years. They just review all of the evidence that came out in the last 2-3 years. They put it in a meta-analysis, so the statistical analysis, just to capture any benefit. And usually they show very little benefit or none at all compared to, say, placebo. So, and this is why kind of the medical establishment is questioning the whole nutritional approach to this. But I hope I've shown you why I think that this kind of approach doesn't work. So next slide, please. So what we actually know that is happening, that of course, what you eat and importantly, what you don't eat can affect your mood. There is absolutely no question about it. And I'm sure you probably would agree with me. And scientific evidence does show that there is a link between diet and common mental disorders. Absolutely, no question about it. And we know that the healthy dietary patterns normally associated with reduced risk of mood disorders, and unhealthy patterns, they obviously increase the risk of mental health problems. So there is the term called nutritional psychiatry. So this was first studied, appeared in scientific studies, so that's 2017. And this is a field of nutritional research that studies specific nutrients or diet and depression or diet and anxiety interactions. So they've identified it, they've kind of proven that the link does exist, and now they're researching every single element, just trying to see or to find the best solution to the problem. So what has been found, so that the healthy diet obviously significantly associated with reduced likelihood of depression, and it is true for any age, in children, adults, and it's true across all countries and cultures, and we do have extensive animal data. So next slide, please. Next one. And this is the one of the most famous trials that investigated a dietary change in a 12-week randomized control trial for treatment of major depressive disorders. And I find it quite interesting because they've actually used real foods here. And so they've changed the diet. They called it MODI Med diet. So it was very heavy in vegetables, fruit, whole grains, oily fish, olive oil, legumes, nuts, a little bit of red meat, and a bit of dairy. So this reminds me of Mediterranean diet, of course. And yes, it did show, what does it say there, that there's, it's in the conclusion bit there, I should have highlighted it there, so that it did show significant difference in reduction of depressive symptoms. So what they say here, these results indicate that dietary improvement may provide an efficacious and accessible treatment strategy for the management of this highly prevalent mental disorder. So they did show a massive, considerable benefit, which was amazing, of course. But now we want to know how it all works. So based on that trial, there's this EU-backed project that published recommendations for diet and mood, and that happened in 2019. So they call it melancholic microbiome, or they actually pose the question, does it have anything to do with our gut microbiome? So what they found really was that people with depression or vulnerability to depression should be encouraged to eat plant-based diets with higher levels of grains, fibers, and fish. And according to this new recommendation published by the MyNet Gut Consortium. And this is official guidelines in EU now since 2019. So we are making progress. it hasn't yet made it into mainstream medicine like NHS, but there is some hope, of course. Next slide, please. So we, of course, as scientists, we want to know why, how does it work exactly? Is it because this kind of dietary change, or this, diet that is rich in vegetables, fruit and fibers and fish, does it reduce inflammation? Is this how it works? Because we know that a depressive brain does have higher inflammation. Or is it about oxidative stress? Because we know this kind of diet does have a lot of antioxidants. And we, of course, know that, there is a whole theory of free radicals and antioxidants. And we need to have a lot of antioxidants to neutralize those free radicals because they may be harmful. Or is it about chemical imbalances in the brain, all about these neurotransmitters that we talk about, dopamine, serotonin? So does diet affect those? Or is it about nutrient density? So these kind of foods, they provide a lot of nutrients. So the gram for gram, or if we look at the calorie, each calorie provides us much more nutrients compared to, say, typical Western diet. Or is it about managing stress and cortisol? So how do we explain it? And what the research tends to show that it's indeed linked to our gut bacteria. Any change in the diet does affect our gut microbiome in a way that it affects our brain. And I think this kind of statement is very, very powerful. How does this gut bacteria actually affect our brain? How do we allow this to happen? Do they actually rule and control us? So this is the question the scientific literature is trying to answer now. And it's recently been referred to as our second brain. So like this is the study, this was a big review published in a very well respected medical journal. And it asked the question, is there a link and how does it all work? And they did indeed confirm that, yes, maybe we do have a second brain, and maybe it is potentially more powerful and more important than our own brain. So if you wanted to read this study, this is the abstract there, but you can get the link to, if you Google it, you can get the link to the full review. So you probably, if you joined me for the previous talks about digestion, especially, I did talk a lot about microbiome and how important it is for digestive health. But just to remind you, so on the next slide, we have an explanation what microbiome actually is. So we know it's not just bacteria or beneficial gut bacteria that we have in the gut. It's also viruses, it's yeasts, it's fungi, it's parasites. So the whole host of this is called microbiome. And we know that this is the visual representation of actually how many microbial cells are inside of us compared to human cells. So you can see that we definitely are outnumbered. And this is kind of scary to think, to kind of know this kind of statistics, yeah? So next slide, please. What we have in here, so how can gut bacteria affect our mood? So this has already been confirmed in the studies. So we know that people who are deficient in beneficial or good type of gut bacteria, they have higher rates of anxiety and depression. This has been definitely established. And I'll show you a couple of examples later. We also know that people who have increased level of cortisol, which is a stress hormone, also have increased risk of developing any mood disorders. We also know that intestinal microbiota or gut bacteria, they produce and they can make certain vitamins for us. And they can help us absorb vitamin D, for example. And we also know that 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut by gut bacteria. It's not produced in the brain. So we know that also the gut bacteria, it can regulate neurophysiological functions. So almost kind of how our nervous system works and how it fires. So this is a really crazy example, I think, that kind of proved to me that absolutely no question that whatever happens in our gut, those little gut bacteria, they definitely control how we feel and how we behave. So this was an experiment done, I believe, in the 60s. So we kind of knew about this, but we forgot. So it was an experiment with mice and a parasite called toxoplasmosis. So when the mice is infected with this parasite, mice lose fear of cats, and quite the opposite, they start loving cats. And as a result, obviously, they are getting killed by cats. But what happens this way? So the parasite actually doesn't care about the mice. They want to get into the cat. And their way is through the mice, right? So they hijack mouse's brain, make them run after cats, and as a result, being eaten by the cat, the parasite gets into a cat. How clever. So just thinking about it, that a parasite in the gut can change mice's behavior is just crazy to me. And it just proves to me that, you know, they do indeed rule us, and they can make the way how we feel and how we behave even. So there were other studies that picked up after that, so quite recently, so that's 2017, what they did, because they wanted to prove, is it a cause or is it an effect? Is actually having or seeing a low level of beneficial gut bacteria in the gut is a consequence of someone being depressed, or is that the cause, right, of someone being depressed? Because that would determine the treatment, right? So what they've done, you probably know about the fecal transplantation, or probably heard about it. So basically, you get a healthy donor, or a donor who has a particular disease or condition, and you take their stool, you clean it, and you just use like a bacterial DNA basically from that stool, and you put it up into through enema to another person or another animal, right? So this is called transplantation of fecal matter. It may sound disgusting, but they do a lot of, it's become really important in treatment of antibiotic resistant pathogenic kind of infections, like Clostridium difficile, for example. And it does work. So what they've done with mice in this experiment, they did fecal transplantation from humans with irritable bowel syndrome. So that's diarrhea, constipation, pain, bloating, so all of the collection of different symptoms. And also people had anxiety as well. And they put that into really healthy mice. And what happened with mice? They actually started showing anxiety-like behaviors. So they did show that changing of the microbiome changes or starts or initiates the disease or condition. Again, I'll say this is pretty fascinating. And mice also lost interest in previously pleasurable activities. They absolutely had no interest for life at all. So that's a depressive-like behavior. And then the research exploded. So we have a lot of publications then on the next slide, just to give you an example, that there were lots of research papers showing that, yes, indeed, there's link between gut microbiomes and depression, and evidence mounts that, yes, indeed, gut bacteria can influence mood and prevent depression. So yeah, now we have so many studies that it's really difficult to keep up with all of this. And on the next slide, potentially that's not really kind of, this is a bit technical. So, but for me, I really wanted to know, I want to understand how these gut microbes affect our brain. How do they communicate? So these are the things, or we call them bacterial metabolites or chemicals that are produced by bacteria. And when you do a stool test, we look at the gut bacteria that you have, and also we look at some of these metabolites. So some stool tests do show if you produce short-chain fatty acids and butyrate, for example, and if your level is good enough or not. So all of these things are produced by bacteria, and these things can get into our bloodstream, and they are sent to our brain, and these are the things that affect our brain, or chemistry of the brain. So that's quite fascinating. So on the next slide, I'll show you the example of depressed microbiome, as we call it. I don't know if you can see it very well. So basically, this is the list of commensal bacteria. So this is the normal or typical gut microbiome. We would expect a person to have good levels of all of these bacteria. As you can see in this particular person, most of the bacteria is on the low side, on the left-hand side, where it's highlighted as LLL, so means low, low, low. Where you see a result called DL, means below detectable levels. So they're completely missing certain types of bacteria. So this person was so anxious, so depressed, and it's been years. It's difficult to say what happened, what initiated all of this, but we believe that overuse of antibiotics, potentially some environmental toxins, obviously diet does play a massive role, artificial sweeteners, but we'll go through that in the next part of the presentation. I kind of explain how they all affect, or the beneficial or detrimental effect of all of these things. So when you do the stool test, and when I see this kind of picture, I don't even need to know you or know anything about you. I can tell you are depressed for sure. And then you can also see in the, so on the other side here, where you can see relative abundance kind of section, and where you see patient result, you can see how low the bar is compared to healthy cohort. You can see the blues and the greens. Can you all see that? Yeah, so this bar, this is how, yes, exactly, yes, Stella, yeah. So this is, we would expect you to have as many, or the bar should be as tall at least, but you can see you are deficient in majority of bacteria, and you're missing almost, several of them, very important ones. So how do we improve our microbiomes? This is probably the more important things, right? We know that childbirth delivery method does matter. So if someone's born by C-section, we would normally see, when we test their microbiome when they grow up, when they're adults, we do see a difference, absolutely. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that, because these children who are born by cesarean, of course, it's not all children, but they do have a high risk of developing atopic conditions, so eczema, asthma, allergies, things like that. And we do believe it's because their microbiome develops differently, completely differently, because you get your first inoculation by beneficial bacteria when you go through your mother's birth canal, and this is how you get your first inoculation. And if that doesn't happen now in hospitals, I believe that they encourage, even if you're born with a C-section, they encourage mothers to collect their microbiome, and they do inoculation. Yeah, in certain clinics they do that. So other things that affect development of our gut microbiome is, believe it or not, sunshine. This is why vitamin D is actually good for us. We know that vitamin D improves our gut microbiome, especially natural vitamin D productions through the skin. Sports activities, definitely a good idea. This is why it's good for our health, because it improves our gut microbiome. Having pets is another big one, because of course you're in very close contact with your pet, and you exchange certain bacteria. Sleep is super important. We know people who are sleep deprived or who work shifts, like 24-hour shifts or night shifts, they change, their microbiome is totally different. Of course, then we have to think about the environment. So on the next slide, it shows that, yes, of course, if you live in a very toxic environment, polluted environment, it will affect your microbiome. And there are so many other things that we need to consider, of course. On the next slide, we know, yes, and I see this all the time with clients, unfortunately, because we all try to reduce sugar intake. We know sugar is not good, of course. And then we switch to diet drinks, and we think it's better because they don't have calories, they don't have sugar. They have sugar substitutes, and things like aspartame, for example. And it's been shown in every study that aspartame damages good type of gut bacteria and encourages the growth of bad type of gut bacteria. And there is also association between the intake of sugar substitutes and depression. There are also dietary emulsifiers. So again, these are in processed foods. So the emulsifier is something that, when you wash your dishes with fairy liquid, this is an emulsifier. So imagine that in your gut lining, it emulsifies your gut lining almost. So if you have obviously a very high level of emulsifiers, Artificial sweeteners I mentioned, so obviously refined sugar diets, of course, we know sugar is not good. Level of stress also affects our gut microbiome. So yeah, alcohol as well. But we know that although some small amounts of alcohol have been shown to be beneficial for gut bacteria, but it's a little bit every day rather than binge drinking once a week. So a little bit of, say, a small glass of red wine with your dinner have been shown to be beneficial. So about antibiotics, yes, why are we having such an epidemics of mood disorders, anxiety, depression, even something more serious than that, especially in children? But what I'm seeing again with a lot of young clients and patients is that they've been through a lot of antibiotics already. If they have if they have a sneeze or cough, go to doctors and they're given antibiotics again and again and again and again. And there is a cumulative effect. And there's a lot of studies now showing that antibiotic exposure does increase the risk of depression, anxiety, and even psychosis. So I wish parents knew that because I think we need to protect our children. And I would probably say that we need to, or ideally, antibiotics need to be used in only very, very kind of, life or death kind of situations. And we need to allow our children to heal naturally as much as we can because we this is how our immune system develops in children. They get coughs and colds and flus and viruses, but this is how the immune system is actually educated to develop antibodies to those things and to beat them, instead of just killing them off. And that's, it doesn't do any favors for the immune system, I believe. So other things that have been shown to improve our gut microbiome is, of course, diet. So this is the study that actually showed that you can change your gut microbiome completely and radically in just 3 to 4 days if you make a very radical change in your diet. And this has been shown in a lot of, you probably heard of, researchers going to Africa and living with tribes. And they do this microbiome test before and after, and it's completely different, of course. So yeah, this is how fast it can all happen. And I think this is what happened to me actually when I first, I don't know if you know about me, I should probably have told you a little bit about me before. I became a nutritionist because I had really bad eczema all over my face, and it was like weeping. So it was constantly leaking subcutaneous liquid, and then just was cracking, drying. It's just horrendous. And I've tried all different doctors, been to, of course, I could use steroid creams and emollients and a light therapy. There was another option to try and reduce eczema. And I've tried the homeopathy for 2 years, hypnotherapy, acupuncture. I've even gone to the Dead Sea, to the skin clinics there. And guess what helped eventually? Changing my diet helped. And it wasn't really important what the change was, as long as the change was dramatic. So what I did, I just cut out sugar, coffee, tea, dairy, and gluten. I just read one of those, books from Amazon, something like Patrick Holford, I believe, something really, really basic about nutrition. But because that was all I was eating, my normal diet was sugar, dairy, gluten, and maybe a little bit of protein, right? Animal protein. That was all I was eating. And this is why the diet change was so dramatic, because I had to cut out everything and basically substitute my diet with something completely different that I've never eaten before. And this is what happened. My eczema disappeared, completely disappeared. I was in remission for the first 5 years of, and I just couldn't believe it. And this is why I went to study, and I graduated as a nutritionist. And I never looked back. But this is how obviously powerful diet can affect us. We also know, in terms of depression and anxiety, we also know that diversity is key. So when we go back to that gut microbiome picture from the test, you saw how low diversity that person had. He didn't have several different important gut bacteria at all. And the other beneficial bacteria were quite low. So diversity was very, very low. So again, we know that if we eat exactly the same things every single day, our gut microbiome is not going to be diverse. We're not feeding them properly. Yeah. So on the next slide, we have some, again, there was like a wave of reports because of the new research that came out, that we know that gut microbiome changes very quickly with the diet. But what they also found, which is really tricky for us nutritionists and for clients as well, that the same exact foods affect each person's differently. And this is the whole difficulty that we have to go through. Again, going back to that, each person is individual, and there is not one perfect diet that will be perfect for every single person, because we are very different. Yes, and it is personal. So when you work with a nutritional therapist, I guess we do lots of different tests. We look at, how you grew up. We look at all of the different factors that kind of could have impacted how your microbiome developed, how your immune system developed, and how your brain developed. Then we can come up with a bit more personalized things. Or we could just try different things. For example, lots of people feel great on vegan diets, but not everyone will be healthy on a vegan diet. Absolutely. Some other people feel great on carnivore diets. And this is why you constantly have this fight between carnivores and vegans. But again, there is no right answer. So it's very, very individual. Right, so, but what definitely does work, so on the next slide is a little joke about psychobiotics. So we call them psychobiotics. So we can actually, if we see very depleted gut microbiome, we actually know what to do in order to make it more diverse, in order to grow those missing types of gut bacteria. So, and we know, of course, we are bombarded with probiotics, with advertising, and with, there's so many different types of supplements now on the market, but it's so difficult to kind of navigate through all of this. What is good for me? This is the main question I get from the clients. Oh, I heard this Simprove liquid. I heard it's so good. So do I need to take it? Or I heard about this bacteria. Or I heard about that. Or soil-based probiotics. There's so many different types. So yes, if we look at them in detail on the next slide, these are the main things that I would probably pay attention to. It's best to go for a lot of different strains. So not just, let's say, one probiotic with one strain, which is, for example, bifidobacterium or lactobacillus. Of course, if we see your stool test and you don't have bifidobacterium at all, this is probably what I would recommend you to take. So, but if we are thinking about diversity of your gut microbiome, I would go for a multi-strain probiotic, which would contain 14, 20 different strains of probiotic. Then there are prebiotics, of course. So these are the things that feed different types of gut bacteria. And there are so many types, and they are quite specific, as I'll show you some research later. So we have FOS, which is fructooligosaccharides, GOS, galacto-oligosaccharides, inulin, beta-glucans. So there are so many different types, but these are kind of the main things that we use in research. So next one is the research that I wanted to show you. So this investigated, again, it was a systematic review of effect of probiotics on depressive symptoms in humans. And what they found that basically this is a review of all of the intervention trials that used probiotics and placebo and compared the effect. And what they found, surprisingly, that the majority of the studies found positive results on all measures of depressive symptoms. However, they also found that it was strain specific. So not just any probiotic, but you need to get the very specific strains, specific types of probiotics. And it also depended on the dosing, the number of bacteria, duration of treatment, and it was very different effects based on that. But they have recommended it as an adjunct therapy with antidepressants. So on the next slide, I actually just found it today. This was a new study that I wasn't aware of, which came out in 2020. again, a massive review of the evidence. Does it show the journal? No, I think it was one of them. There's a British Medical Journal it is. So it's one of the most respected journals in the world again. And what they found that, of course, they utilizing, so they've looked at pre and probiotics used together in all of the interventional trials. And they did find that utilizing pre and probiotics together may be potentially useful treatment, which could be used alongside any other treatments like antidepressants, for example. So furthermore, what they found, the patients with certain comorbidities, so this is another diseases or conditions that they have, so such as IBS, for example, they've experienced much greater benefits being on pre and probiotics. And of course, we know that they improve our digestive function as well. So this is quite hopeful, I guess, and this is where the research is going. So what I use in clinic, these are the two supplements that I found. Again, they only came out literally 6 months ago. They're very new to the market. They are very specific. You can see in the name, they actually do have a claim because they use specific strains that improve mood and anxiety. So there are two leaders on the market currently. So In Vivo is the UK-based company. So they've created this mind and mood probiotic, which contains specific bacterial strains that have been researched in humans for stress-associated disorders and what else they say here, for anxiety and depression. So very specific mood probiotic. And the other one is Australian company. Again, they just came on the market literally 6 months ago. It's called Biome Lift probiotics. So again, this is specifically to improve mood balance, and actually they say sleep as well here. So I use this, and actually I'm getting quite good results from clients. They report quite beneficial outcomes. But of course, we don't have to use supplements. We can have fermented foods that contain probiotics. So you've probably seen that slide before in my presentations before. There's so many different types of probiotics. You can make your fermented vegetables yourself. You don't even have to buy them. It's so easy to make sauerkraut. You just put, you just shred the cabbage, pour water on top and add salt and let it ferment. That's it. There's nothing else you need to do. Kimchi is a bit more difficult to make because it requires a lot of spices and special fermentation process. Kombucha, I've never tried. Miso, you could just use miso soup. It's already fermented. Yogurt, kefir, you can buy them in any supermarket. And I also use raw aged cheeses, things like Roquefort, but they have to be unpasteurized cheeses, of course, the ones that contain live bacteria. So let's look at the prebiotics in detail. The research actually shows that prebiotic supplementation or prebiotic dietary intake is potentially more beneficial than taking probiotics or live bacteria, because not all probiotics are going to colonize your gut. While you're taking probiotics, you feel beneficial effect. As soon as you stop taking them, effect may go away. So you either always have to consume fermented foods or always have a probiotic capsule as a supplement. But what we know, if you increase your fiber intake in the diet, the effects are much more significant, because this fiber, it feeds bacteria, feeds beneficial bacteria, and helps bacteria to produce those short-chain fatty acids that I showed you previously, that then are absorbed into our blood and communicate to our brain. So this is the beneficial effect you're getting. So currently, we know that we don't eat enough fiber as a nation. So Stella, if you go back to one before, please, it shows you you need to have, and recommended daily intake for fiber is 30 grams per day. We currently have on average 18 grams per day. So we also know that no single prebiotic fiber will be good enough to fully cultivate a diverse gut bacteria, right? Because different bacteria or microbial species, as we call them, they prefer different fibers, of course. So variety is key here. So let's have a look at different variety. antibodies. On the next slide, just a nice picture of different things, you know, the vegetables, so for example, we know garlic and leeks, they're very high in soluble fiber. Artichokes are very high in fiber as well, mushrooms as well, asparagus. So, and let's look at the sub classes of fiber. So these are galacto-oligosaccharides. Just as an example for you to understand, so 100 grams of boiled lentils will give you 8 grams of fiber. And yeah, so I couldn't find the chickpea number, probably is very similar, but then green peas 6, lima beans 7, so kind of similar. So imagine how much you need to eat in order to get to 30 grams per day. Yeah. So on the next slide, we also have the galacto-oligosaccharide prebiotic fiber supplement that I use. So if I see a person with very low level of bifidobacterium in the gut, and I give them probiotic, or they've been taking probiotic, and it doesn't make any difference at all, I'm questioning why this probiotic does not want to populate the gut. What's wrong with the gut? Is that an environmental issue? Are there a lot of, say, pathogenic type of bacteria or bad type of bacteria? And do they produce some toxins that maybe make the environment not suitable for bifidobacterium to populate? Or maybe they don't have enough food, so they can't survive there. So the GOS fiber, this particular one, has been looked, so this is the intervention trial for anxiety in women. They took quite young females, 18 to 25, and they fed them with GOS fiber. I can't see the number. So it was a 4-week double-blind placebo-controlled trial, 64 females in the trial, and then they did the calculations, and they basically did find a significant beneficial effects on anxiety scores. So all the females had anxiety, of course. And then they also looked at their gut microbiome change, and they found a massive change in the gut microbiome in terms of bifidobacteria. So now, based on this research, this supplement company, again, they've created this probably about a year ago only. And it's a very, very popular supplement now for improvement in gut microbiome. And now they can basically claim, unless you can show the study that proves something, you can't claim any health benefits. So this is how the health claims law works in the EU or in the UK now. And so what they now can say about it, that this particular fiber targeted towards increasing bifidobacterium and also lactobacillus. So they've shown that 2 of the most beneficial bacteria can be increased by taking this fiber. And what I use basically is only 2 grams per day of this fiber has shown beneficial effect. So yeah, this is the one I normally use for my clients. Now, on the next slide, we get everything about inulin. So it's another beneficial fiber. And this is the approximate content in different vegetables. So artichoke contains the highest level of inulin. You can also get inulin fiber as a powder. So, and I usually add it to my fiber blend as well for some of the clients. So next slide shows you beta-glucans, and again the content in different mushrooms and also oats. Oat bran contains beta-glucans. Beta-glucans considered to be very important for immune system as well, and we know there is an interaction between the immune system and gut microbiome. So by giving you more beta-glucans, you grow specific types of bacteria that have been shown to be beneficial for immune function. This is how it works. Everything works through the gut bacteria. The highest content is in oat bran. So I do sometimes advise clients to add oat bran into their morning cereal, for example, or you can just take it as a supplement again. You can see it's quite high. So all of the numbers are per 100 grams here. Okay, so you are the beneficial effect starts. We start seeing beneficial effects from 3 grams of beta-glucans per day. This is how much you would need to take. Again, you can take it as a supplement as well. There's plenty of supplements. So, and there's another thing, how you can improve your gut microbiome, which actually, when I looked into the studies a couple of years ago, I could not believe it. It's by fasting. And you probably know, that if you've seen my presentations before, how big I am on fasting or intermittent fasting regimes. And if you've seen my TED Talk, this is what I talk about in terms of, yes, you can improve your gut microbiome diversity by just trying different types of intermittent fasting. So in the next kind of 10 slides, I kind of give you a little bit of understanding of how you can, if you've never tried intermittent fasting before, how you could start it, and what kind of things you need to be aware of before you start. And again, intermittent fasting or fasting as a concept is not new at all. Every single religion in the world has some kind of fasting. So like there's Ramadan, we know about Great Lent, even Yom Kippur, all of the big religions in the world have some kind of fasting. Even then we know that Plato said that I fast for greater physical and mental efficiency. So recent studies have started looking into that because, of course, when all of this intermittent fasting started, all of the intermittent fasting craze started to be very popular, about 4 or 5 years ago in European countries, in nutritional world, for weight regulation first, people started noticing other effects, like they could think clearly, they could perform better, and they couldn't quite explain why this is happening. And they even called it fasting high. So they could feel really, really high and really amazing, almost blissful kind of feeling. So let's look at the study. So this was a first study I found 2015 that looked at how we can increase these two types of gut bacteria, also very, very important gut bacteria, after fasting. It was a pilot study just to kind of prove the concept. Does fasting improve or increase Akkermansia? So Akkermansia is one of the most beneficial gut bacteria you can have because it helps you regulate your metabolism. So if I work with weight loss clients, for example, and we do and say it's a very resistant weight loss, right? It just, no matter what we try, it doesn't just shift at all. So we'll look at the gut bacteria, and most of the time what I see is either very low level of Akkermansia or none at all, no growth at all. And this is when we try fasting, and this is when we try things that we know can grow Akkermansia. And also, I haven't included in this presentation, but literally last week, we received the first Akkermansia supplement. It didn't exist before. So now we have a probiotic with Akkermansia. So I'm going to try it on some of the weight loss clients. It's quite expensive. It's about £70 for a month's supply. But I guess when you're desperate and you want, try everything, you'd go for it, I guess. So yeah, what they showed that they observed an increase in microbial diversity over the study period. So how long was the period of study? 6 weeks. So they did a fasting program with laxative treatment for 1 week, followed by a 6-week intervention with a probiotic formula. And it did work. So great. Now, next one. I specifically looked, are there any intervention trials that show that fasting can actually improve depressive symptoms or depressive scores? And I found this study. So this is one of the biggest centers of fasting in the whole world. It's a fasting retreat. I believe it's based in Germany. It's called Buchinger, potentially pronunciation. So they have a lot of people who come there to fast, and they did a lot of research on them. So this study included 1,400 people, and they did various types of fasting between 4 to 21 days. And they specifically measured depression and anxiety and mood disorders outcomes. So what they found was, in one word, it led to enhancement of emotional and physical well-being. So of course, there's no surprise there. Right, so if you're new to intermittent fasting, there are several different types that you can try. It's either you eat 3 meals per day with 5-hour fast between each meal, but it has to be fasting, just water, nothing else. Or you could do 16-8 kind of window, if you're familiar with that. So you eat only within 8 hours during the day and you fast for 16 hours, also including the overnight fast. Or you can do 5-2, so 2 non-consecutive days during the week that you choose. You either do under 500 calories per day or you fast completely, just water fast. Again, start gradually, of course. Don't just go from normal eating to fasting twice a week. That's not recommended, of course. That's very dramatic change. Also, research shows that if you do alternate day fasting, also works, but I find it a bit too harsh and probably unnecessary. So on the next slide, there was a quite interesting study I found, effect of caloric restriction on depression. So yes, fasting does work, but also if you just restrict your calories, it also mimics almost like a fasting diet, and it has very similar effects. So if you don't want to do complete fasting or intermittent fasting, you can just try caloric restriction and you should improve your mood. This is what the studies show. So some of the contraindications that you need to be aware of. So any drastic lifestyle shift should be undertaken with the guidance of a health professional, for sure, especially if you have things like diabetes, medication, any type of medication. History of eating disorders is actually, fasting is contraindicated for that. Pregnancy, breastfeeding, if you're very old or frail or very young, probably not a good idea because it also restricts the amount of nutrients your body gets. If you're immunocompromised or if you have any heart problems or high blood pressure. So you have to be very careful. Some practical tips. So of course, talk with your doctor first and you have to ease into it. I'm talking about fasting, yeah. If you want to try kind of a lighter version, you could try and push your breakfast a little bit later and push your dinner a little bit earlier. So you kind of start using 14-10 protocol, so which is 14 hours fasting, 10-hour eating window. Think about nutrient density always. So every food choice that you're making, it has to be for a reason. This is how I approach all of my eating. I know that I need to eat my protein, my vegetables, my fiber, my essential fatty acids, and that's my priority for the day. If I have space for anything else, then yes, I'll have a dessert. But I have to tick all my boxes first. And think about prebiotics and probiotics. Try to incorporate them into your diet if you haven't tried them before. Think about trying to achieve 30 grams of fiber intake per day through just the foods. Again, think about variety of the foods. All of this, veg boxes that you can get subscription for, they provide you seasonal local produce. And perhaps it could be some vegetables you've never tried before, or go to the supermarket and choose a vegetable you've never tried before and try to cook it or use it in your cooking. Some other supplements and tests I would recommend for someone who presents with major depression or anxiety or any other mood disorders, basically. We would definitely recommend to start with gut microbiome test because it could be a completely different picture. So yes, there are some supplements that could be generic that I could recommend, like galactic oligosaccharides, like the mood probiotic I've shown you before, but it's best for me to be more tailored because then I could be more efficient with you. So if you wanted to do the gut microbiome test, I use the GI Effects by Genova Diagnostics, which is the American lab. It's considered one of the best in the world. And we're doing a special promotion. I put in 14th of February, but yeah, Stella suggested maybe we could extend it for the whole week. So if you want to book it, so it's a special price. Then I would also look at vitamin D levels and omega-3 to omega-6 ratio also has been shown in studies, obviously to be important for mood disorders. And if you wanted to purchase any of the supplements I mentioned in the presentation, you can go on Natural Dispensary website. And if you use the code OH15, it gives you 15% discount on those supplements when you check out. So I think that's it. Yes. So please, any questions?
Anybody got any questions? I have some questions if nobody else has. No? So I have two questions. I mean, you touched on it before. If you're not suffering with anxiety, like serious anxiety or serious depression, but you have your ups and downs and, you know, life stuff happens and it puts you into a little bit of a low, do you suggest then that, you know, because you said, you know, the prebiotic and the probiotic is the way to go for that period. So for example, I'm going to simplify it, maybe it is as simple, but do you then just eat, you know, sauerkraut and kimchi and lots of fiber for a week and see if that affects you? It's that easy.
Yeah, it can be as easy as that, yes.
And is it it's like you said with your skin, but is it instantaneous? Does it take?
It should be, yes. Like I said, you know, dietary change affects your gut microbiome within 3 days. So it could be as fast as 3 days. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then it's not something. Is it something that you should always eat that way? You should always have 30 grams of fiber every day, and you should always have probiotics as part of your diet.
Ideally, yes. I mean, it depends on your health status, depends on your goals, yes. But ideally, we would try to achieve 30 grams of fiber per day. I know it's probably not very realistic that, you know, if you try to calculate how many vegetables, legumes, and fruit you need to consume to get to 30 grams of fiber, maybe for some people, it's just not possible. This is when we use the powder supplements, and that's quite easy. So I mix my own fiber supplement with inulin, with all bran, with galacto-oligosaccharides, with a couple of other things, you know, in there. And I take just a tablespoon per day because, you know, I can't achieve 30 grams of fiber per day through vegetables. Sometimes I can't.
Yeah. Can you send me a little tip on that and on what you do with your powder? You said with your all brown and everything, and I'll put that in that Facebook page because that's interesting. I'm not sure. Yeah, I wouldn't know personally. I wouldn't know where to start with that. So and also, how do you calculate the fiber? I mean, I guess you can look it up online to calculate the fiber of each vegetable and how much you would need to have really to keep yourself healthy. I've got a specific question here for you. Sorry, my mouse is weird today. We're definitely having technical problems here today. Can you see it in chat?
Yes, I do. I have to take a Meprazole gastro-resistant capsule to protect my stomach from the painkillers I take. Do you know how these impact on absorption of nutrients and if they have any impact on gut microbiome? Yes, absolutely. So omeprazole is usually prescribed for a very short period of time because we know it blocks acid production, stomach acid. Stomach acid is super important for you to start digesting your food. And we do know that omeprazole does impact gut bacteria. I can't tell you exactly how, but I could probably find a study to show you exactly because that's been investigated for sure. Yeah. So do you know how this impacts on absorption of nutrients? Yes, we do know that low level of stomach acid potentially would reduce your absorption of protein and vitamin B12. Stomach acid also kills any potential pathogens, virus, bacteria that come from the food, from water, from the environment. So it's your protection really from the pathogens. Yeah, so ideally as short as possible period of time, yeah.
I remember your first event you did with us, your first presentation, you talked about how stomach acid is actually good for you. I remember that because we thought at the time, a lot of us thought at the time that it wasn't a good thing, but a certain amount is good, so that's interesting. Can I ask a question for everybody here? Who currently does intermittent fasting? Does anyone do intermittent fasting here? No, okay. I do intermittent fasting, and I have a question about intermittent fasting. So I do 16-8, and it's become very normal for me now. It's just like part of my lifestyle, because I can very easily go without breakfast, and then I just I have my first meal at 12:30 or whatever. So I'll have like a brunch, let's just say. This is a question I was going to ask you. If you have already done like intermittent fasting for a long time, should you then progress to the next stage? So, for example, if some of the people here haven't started it and they want to try intermittent fasting, maybe they could try with the easiest one. What was it? It was
14:10. Yeah, so just
14:10. So you don't eat for 14 hours and you eat within a period of 10 hours. Okay, so if they then do that for how long? I don't know, 6 months. Does it kind of stop working? Not stop working, but does its effectiveness tailor off, and then you have to move to the next level? Or
well, we know that the golden time, or the best kind of regime, would be 16-8, really. But I guess as an interim, yeah, you can start from 14:10, but it's not going to be as effective, no. But the effectiveness doesn't taper off, if that's your question. It will still be effective. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But with the 16-8, okay. So if you've done 16-8 for years, or for a year or 2 years, does it still work? Is it still effective, or should you then move to less? To okay.
No, I believe you just find the way that works for you, whatever regime, and you just stick to it. Yeah, it becomes your normal. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes, so it doesn't kind of, the effectiveness doesn't taper off. That's interesting. Okay, there's some questions here around, yeah, do try and follow the 16-8. Yeah, it is, it's very good. It's very good. I find it's the one thing. I did actually use years ago, well, actually I did it for weight loss because I wanted to lose weight. I did the 2 days at 500 calories, and then the rest I could eat anything. That was tough. It was really tough. You know, you get used to it. But I have friends who actually fast for the whole day on water or broth, or you know, that's quite tough as well. But people do it, right? And that's really good for you too, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it works for them, I probably am not that strong.
No, I'm not that strong either. So Nikki says, if you make your own sauerkraut, does it go off after a while? Hers tasted bad.
No, that's the whole point of fermentation. Things don't go off because bacteria controls or prevents it from going off.
Okay, what can she do for hers to taste better?
Sorry?
What can Nikki do to make her sauerkraut taste better?
Oh, can I speak? It wasn't. It tasted not really bad, but after about a week or so, I had it in the cupboard, and then it started tasting worse. So I thought, has it gone past its like optimum date?
If you bought it in the shop and you opened
I made it myself in one of them jars, in a special jar, the fermenting jar. But then after about a week or so, it tasted terrible.
Yeah, the longer you keep it, the more it ferments. So if you want to stop the fermentation, put it in the fridge, and then it will keep the same taste. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Because there's more and more bacteria, growing, and the taste becomes more sour and sour. Yeah.
That's very brave of you, Nikki, to make it. That's very good. I'm impressed. Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, I hope you found it useful, and
it's interesting.
Any feedback would be great. Appreciate it, please.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was excellent. Thank you. Always. I love all your science-backed. So I just wanted to ask you, because I was so intense with the sharing and the tech at the beginning there, but you said something about it takes the journals, or it takes the medical community a couple of years to catch up with. So can you just repeat that? They gather all the data, and then it takes them a while to put it together and put it into
Yeah, because I mean, if you go to a doctor a specialist, I don't know, who's a specialist in depression or mood disorders, like psychiatrist or someone, right? They will just give you medication. They don't even talk about diet, unfortunately. And yeah, it just takes some time for them to catch up. But some of them already do, which is great. And it's kind of filtering through the mainstream medical community. So
yeah, slowly, I think they're beginning to understand the power of the diet, for sure. And it seems to me like we're just completely controlled by our microbiome. That's it.
Oh, yes.
We're just a big mass of microbiome bacteria, and it controls everything about us. It's crazy.
It is. Yes, it is. And it's sometimes I think about it and I'm like, oh my God, this is actually quite, I don't even know how I feel about it. So someone else controls me. But we do know that people, if they do the fecal transplantation, they totally change, like even their preferences, even their, I don't know, it's just, they've done an experiment with fruit flies once with fecal transplantation, and the fruit flies, after change of their gut microbiome, they changed sexual partners. They started preferring other males, which is crazy, right? Mm-hmm.
Wow. Is that a big thing, fecal transplants with humans as well? Does that happen a lot?
I see a lot of, but I worked for IBS and SIBO clinics in the UK, and it's the most horrendous digestive disorders cases that we see. It's something that doctors can't deal with, obviously, and so we get the worst type of cases. And yeah, a lot of them have tried fecal transplantation already. Yeah.
So that's kind of the last resort, is fecal transplantation. And then it can change it perhaps. Excellent. Well, there's lots of great information there. Yes, everybody, thank you for coming along. What we'll do is we'll take the recording or upload it, and then when you log into Wellbeing at Home and you go into the event, the recording just shows for you there if you've purchased the event. So you won't get an email with the link. Just log in, go back to that page with the event, and you'll see the recording there. It'll recognize you. All this like clever technology we have now, I can't believe it. So it will recognize you, and you'll be able to see it. And yeah, it's great technology. I can't even share a PowerPoint, but the tech behind the scenes is really good. Thank you, Olga, as always, for just a brilliant presentation. So much information, lots to think about. Wishing everybody a wonderful week ahead. Stay well, stay happy. And next week we've got Colin for more Kundalini yoga. If you want to come along to that, I'll send something out during the week. And then Olga, yes, I'll just well, you can get, if you want to do any testing or get the offer with the supplements from Olga, anyway, I'll share it. I'll share the recording on Monday. So if you can go back into, or by Tuesday, if you go back into your event, you'll be able to access the recording, and I'll also put it into the Facebook page. Okie dokes. Brilliant. Thank you. Happy Sunday.
Thank you so much. Well, great to see all of you. Enjoy the evening. Have a good night.
Bye. 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 Bye.